Hi everyone and welcome back to the Eco Certifications Hospitality channel. If you work in hospitality, you've probably heard terms like carbon footprint, net zero, carbon offsetting, or carbon credits. But what exactly is a carbon credit? How does it work? And why is it becoming increasingly relevant for hotels and hospitality businesses? In this video, I will explain the basics in simple terms with a particular focus on the hotel industry. Let's start with a concept that sits at the center of the entire discussion: CO2 equivalent. When we talk about climate change, many people immediately think about carbon dioxide or CO2. However, CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas. There are also gases such as methane, nitrous oxide, or refrigerant gases used in cooling systems. And some of these gases have a much greater warming effect than CO2. For example, 1 kilogram of methane has a much higher climate impact than 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide. To simplify things, scientists use a common unit called CO2 equivalent, often written as CO2e. CO2e converts the impact of all greenhouse gases into a single comparable unit. This allows us to compare different activities using the same measurement. For example, the impacts of driving a car, taking a flight, producing food, or operating a hotel can be then compared thanks to this common unit. All these activities can be expressed in kilograms or tons of CO2 equivalent. Now that we understand CO2 equivalent, we can define a carbon credit. A carbon credit represents 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent that has been avoided, reduced, or removed from the atmosphere. 1 carbon credit equals 1 ton of CO2e. Think of it as a certificate. If a project can demonstrate that it has reduced or removed 1 ton of greenhouse gases, it may be able to generate 1 carbon credit. This carbon credit is somehow a kind of award for reducing the polluting emissions of an activity or a business. The more emissions are avoided, the biggest the reward is. These credits generated can then be used internally in companies to compensate other activities, or sold to companies that want to compensate for part of their emissions. In this case, the company who sold the credit is selling the right to generate emissions to the company who buy the credit. Let's take a simple example. Imagine a renewable energy project that replaces electricity previously generated by a coal-fired power plant. Because less fossil fuel is burned, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. If the project avoids 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, it may receive 10,000 carbon credits. These credits can then be purchased by companies seeking to offset their own emissions. The right to generate CO2 emissions is somehow sold to another company. Fun fact: do you know that Tesla, the electric car manufacturer, generate a big part of its revenue by selling its carbon credit to other companies? Since this manufacturer produces cars that officially are not generating any greenhouse gas, it can sell its right to generate CO2 emissions to other companies. The same principle applies to some reforestation projects, mangrove restoration projects, or methane capture systems. The key point is that the reductions must be measured, documented, and verified according to recognized standards. For this, an independent organization needs to measures and verifies these reductions. Why does this matter for hospitality businesses? Hotels generate emissions in many different ways. For example, electricity consumption, air conditioning systems, or fuel use. Also, laundry operations or food production and guest transportation. Many hotel groups today are working to reduce these emissions through energy efficiency projects, renewable energy, waste reduction, and more sustainable purchasing practices. However, some emissions, especially guest transportation, are difficult to eliminate completely. This is where carbon credits sometimes enter the discussion. A hotel may first reduce its own emissions as much as possible and then purchase carbon credits to compensate for a portion of its remaining emissions. This is often referred to as carbon offsetting. For example, a hotel might support directly a reforestation project or a renewable energy project or a mangrove restoration project in order to compensate for some of its residual carbon footprint. And the same hotels have also the possibility to purchase certificates, understand certificate of carbon credit to some companies that are themselves supporting these types of projects. It's important to understand that carbon credits are generally not considered a substitute for reducing emissions directly. Most sustainability experts agree that the priority should always be to measure emissions first, then, based on this evaluation, to reduce emissions, and finally, to offset only the emissions that cannot yet be eliminated. For hotels, this means focusing first on energy efficiency, HVAC optimization, renewable energy, waste reduction, and sustainable operations. Only then should carbon credits become part of the conversation. To summarize, CO2 equivalent is a common unit used to measure the climate impact of different greenhouse gases. A carbon credit represents 1 ton of CO2 equivalent that has been reduced, avoided, or removed. These credits can be traded and used to compensate for emissions that are difficult to eliminate. For hotels, carbon credits can be one tool among many within a broader sustainability strategy, but they should never replace efforts to improve operational efficiency and reduce emissions directly. If your hospitality business is seeking to reduce its CO2 emission through energy optimization with or without financial investment, through food waste reduction, or by implementing new sustainable operational practices, we will be more than happy to guide you. Drop us an email to discuss further on how we can help you. If you enjoyed this video, found value in it, don't forget to like, to subscribe to our channel, and to share it with hospitality professionals interested in sustainability. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.